everyone, this is Erica with Confessions of a Homeschooler. Thank you so much for joining me for today's video. So in our last video, we learned how to do the knit stitch, and today we're going to learn how to do the purl stitch. Now I'm going to do two different videos for this. One purl stitch English style, tensioning the yarn in your right hand, and one for purl stitch, tensioning the yarn in your left hand, which is called continental style. That was the hardest stitch for me to learn, by the way, is purling with my left hand. So hopefully that video will help some of you out. But let's go ahead and get started. So this is a little sample that I just made so that you can kind of see a difference between the stitches. So this side is the knit side, and the knit stitches are these little V's right here. So right here, both of those count as one stitch and they make this cute little V. If we flip our work over on the back side, there are what are called purl bumps. And just like the other side where two of the legs created a V, on this side, two of the legs are actually creating these little kind of horizontal looking bumps. And so here would be one, these two will be one stitch, these two will be one stitch, and so on. Okay, so when you are, I just did a video on how to count your rows, so we're not going to go over that in this video, but I just wanted you to know what it's going to look like when you are purling. So purling typically is the back side of your work, but you can also use it as a decorative stitch as well. Purling is what you will see when you are making hats and you have to do ribbing on a brim. You will usually do one purl stitch, one knit stitch, one purl stitch, one knit stitch, and that creates kind of this brim look. So let's go ahead and show you how to do the purl stitch. So we are going to go ahead and start out. Now, as you'll notice, my yarn for the purl stitch is coming out the front of my work, and that is exactly where we want it. When you're knitting, the yarn is going to be coming out from the back. When you're purling, the yarn needs to be coming out from the front. Very important to remember. All right, so now when you're knitting, you put your needle in with your tips going the same way, and if you saw my first video, you already know that. When you're purling, you're going to be going with your needle tips facing opposite directions. Okay, so we are going to take our right hand needle and we're going to place it in this first stitch from right to left. And your right hand needle is now going to be in the front. When you're knitting, you're going left to right and your needle pops out the back. Okay, so you're essentially doing the opposite when you are purling. Purls are opposite of knits. Okay, so we're gonna go opposite directions with our needles, go in from the right and out the left side of our stitch. Now, just like with the knit stitch though, we're gonna take our yarn and we are going to go counterclockwise around our working needle here. So around the back and towards you, counterclockwise. You do not want to be going clockwise. That will result in twisted stitches and you don't want that, okay? So around the back, counterclockwise, and then just kind of give yourself some tension here. And then we're going to slip our needle out the back. And now, as you can see, the stitch is made with a new yarn. This is the stitch that was already on our needle. And we can just pull that off now. And so what we've done is make a new stitch with our working yarn. Okay, so let's just do that again. We're going to put our needle in from the front, from the right to left, wrap it around clockwise, and pull it out the back. Okay, and then pull that stitch off our left needle. Now, a couple tips to help you out here. If you're a beginner, it's probably going to be easier for you to literally take your hands off this needle, wrap your yarn around the back. I feel like my hand is in the way for that, so I'm going to kind of show you a little bit different here so you can see, but wrap your yarn around the back side of the needle, and then I use my thumb to kind of help push it through, and then I use this finger to help kind of push it off, if that makes sense. Okay, now once you get more familiar with this, I suggest challenging yourself a little bit and just tensioning your thread. So you can tension it however you want. You can wrap it around your little finger, you could wrap it around this one. I like to wrap it around my little finger and then just kind of hang on to it, and then over my right hand finger like so. And then I hang on to my right hand needle like this, just laying in my hands. And then I use my finger to do all of the motion of my yarn. Okay, so instead of taking my whole hand off and moving it around, I just use my finger. So I'm going to go ahead and put my right hand needle in through my stitch and then just use my finger to wrap that yarn around and then push it off. Okay. All right. And then I'm using my left hand to kind of feed the stitches up and my right hand to kind of pull the stitches down. So here we go. We're going to go in, needles facing opposite direction from in through this first stitch. We're going to wrap the yarn around it, pull it out the back and off. And I'm just going to continue doing this stitch so you can kind of see what that looks like. You can slow this down, you can watch it over and over, you can do it with me. Again, make sure your yarn is going around your needle counterclockwise. And I like to try and challenge myself. This is called flicking. This is English flicking method. I don't know. There's a couple different terms for it probably. But it means I'm using my finger to just kind of flick the yarn around as opposed to taking my entire hand off this needle and pulling it around manually like that. Now, you can do that. I think this works better if you are a beginner because you don't have to tension your yarn. You can just tension your yarn between your first two fingers. That's how my daughter is doing it. She's 10 and she is doing a great job with it, but that finishes our row. Just practice holding your yarn however works best for you. Try a couple different ways. Try a couple different tensioning on a couple different fingers. There's not really any right or wrong here. And yeah, just do whatever works best for you. Now I am going to go ahead and knit this row really quick just so we can get back to a purl row. If we were to purl on this row, we would start getting what is called garter stitch, where we're kind of going back and forth, and I want to keep our knits on this side just for purposes of this tutorial so you can kind of see what the purl stitch looks like on the back. Oops. All right, so I just knit across that just so that we can get back to a purl side here and keep going. And you can just purl down the other side, just purl back and forth on both sides until the whole point of this is for you to get used to how to do the purl stitch. And I know a lot of people think this stitch is harder than the knit stitch. Honestly, now that I've been knitting for a while, it's not harder, it just takes more practice, and probably it's since the second thing you're learning, it probably seems harder. But once you practice the purl stitch, you will become quite fast with it and it won't be any harder. So let's just keep going. I'm going to tension my yarn around my pinky finger, and this first one I usually do have to kind of lift my hand off just to get it going. And now I'm just going to go ahead and go down my row, and you can go slowly. The more you practice this, the better you will get. You will notice my left hand is feeding my stitches up. This first finger is kind of keeping this first stitch from coming off because I do want it close to the tip here, but I don't want it to come off. My right hand is constantly grabbing my stitches and pulling them down so that they are out of the way. Okay, and I'm just going to keep going. Slow down for you guys here. The more you get used to this, the faster you will be. Just make sure for the purl stitch that your yarn is coming out of the front of your work. Okay, and then we have another row of purl stitches. So this is kind of the knit side, this is kind of the purl side. For your sample, I would like you to just purl back and forth both sides. It's going to end up looking more like this. You won't be able to see these doing that, but it will give you a lot of practice doing the purl stitch. So that's how the purl stitch is done, holding the yarn in your right hand, English style and the flicking style. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. If you did, please make sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe so that I know to keep making these videos for you. Thank you so much for joining me today, and I will see you next time.